Hey, what's up, AfterBuzzers and Talking TED Talks Teddy fans? We are breaking down another fascinating topic, and we're dissecting the questions such as why does good sex fade away? This is relationship and love expert Esther Perel on the topic, the secret to desire in long-term relationships. Let's talk about it.
You're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Hello, Teddies, Talking TED Talk fans. Welcome back to another show on Talking TED Talks where we choose a TED Talk of the week. And my name is Yasmine Tanres, and you may know me on some of the shows from AfterBuzz, such as Maniac, Sex Education, which is totally relevant to today, and news anchoring on Long Beach local news. And as said, we always like to dissect a talk because it talks to us. And usually I have my co-host Jesse, who sadly couldn't join us today. But we do have an exciting guest in studio. Excuse me, I'm like all over the place, like feeling it. And we're going to be breaking down the secret to desire in long-term relationships, a talk that Esther Perel gave, and it was really exploring the nature of erotic desire and the dilemmas of demands that come with modern love, because love has really evolved over the centuries, although the innate nature is still there, but the way that we interact with each other and look after each other is very different. And so she raises questions such as, can we want what we already have? So when you're already in a committed relationship, how much do you still desire them? Can you still desire them? And why is the forbidden so erotic? Why does sex make babies and babies spell erotic disaster within couples? So that's a very funny notion right there. And so we want to touch on Esther Perel. She is a Belgian psychotherapist in New York, a sex and relationship experts, having studied the nature of cultural and religious identity, how we negotiate tradition and modernity, individualism and collectivism. So she's also explored the need for security, which comes in hand with love, belonging, and closeness, and the need of freedom, which is kind of something that can be related to erotic desire, adventure, and distance within human relationships. She also has had 2 best-selling books, Mating in Captivity, Reconciling the Erotic and the Domestic, The State of Affairs, Rethinking Infidelity, which is another TED Talk that she is also given on. She also hosts a very interesting podcast called Where Should We Begin?, which actually brings the listeners into, let's say, her therapeutic space, even though they're just tuning in by listening, but it's listening to anonymous couples really talking about infidelity, sexlessness, and griefs, some of the things that they go through in long-term relationships. So without further ado, we are going to introduce our guest in the studio, Chandresh Bhardwaj. Welcome.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
So you are a modern age spiritual advisor and speaker. You come from actually an Indian lineage of gurus and also tantric focused 7th generation that you are,
Yes.
based over here in Los Angeles, which is far removed from India, a very different world.
Right.
And so you have you do meditations, you have retreats, you do workshops, and you're an author of Break the Norms, which a foreword had been written by the Dalai Lama,
Yes.
and it had been endorsed by Deepak Chopra. So some of you may question, why is a spiritual advisor correlating to this subject about desires and long-term relationships? But you would be surprised. Because as you was mentioning, we were having a little chat just beforehand that a lot of people were not just coming to you for spiritual advice, but in the end somehow about relationships.
Huge. And I never knew this is going to be my role, but I think spirituality and relationships are so strongly connected. And if you read the authentic Tantra, sex and spirituality, they are very strongly connected. Sex is considered the first step toward higher consciousness, the first, not the only step. That's how most people look at Tantra. There are 99 more steps, which involve awareness, breathing, just, understanding of emotions. But yeah, I think I've been assigned this interesting role of relationship advisor by people, by universe, and I'm embracing it now.
I love that how you said by the universe that
I
you're
I
embracing
truly feel that.
what
Yeah.
people are coming to you about. And so we like to always start off with a education. Usually it's Jesse and I who will pick a big takeaway. And I want to get a takeaway from you. And before, I'm just going to say that I felt, about the overall talk, it was very insightful with regards to, how the shift of marriage has the view of it has changed, and then the way that we also view partnerships. And so for me, it was like within the erotic space, how she said responsibilities and desires butt heads, which is true because, when you do put, let's say with babies, you got your responsibilities, or with your jobs, you got your responsibilities, and that can really take away that feeling and emotions of desires. And I know there's within, when you are trying to get within a spiritual realm, you build like a mandala, almost as
Right.
if to see like, okay, this is my career, this is my love and relationship status, this is my friendship status, versus this is how spiritual I am. And then
Right.
you can see which one you are more balanced with. But it's just hard, I mean, how do you ensure room for desire when you do have all these responsibilities?
Right. I think honestly, it takes dedicated discipline, a desire, first of all, to cultivate that momentum, to, keep running that momentum. It takes dedication, discipline, and also a conscious desire to keep the relationship alive. When I come across people who have lost that spice or fire in the relationship, somewhere they have also lost a sort of willpower to put any fire in the connection. Life takes over. Sometimes it's the kids. Sometimes it's just the timing of life. Like I wrote a few days ago on my Instagram that meditation, sex, and avocados, they all are connected with the right timing. When you miss the timing, it just goes in a different direction.
Avocados too, yeah? It's
Absolutely.
all about timing.
We live in LA. Avocados got to be in this, equation.
I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah.
So, what was your biggest takeaway from this TED Talk?
One of the most, there were a lot of takeaways, but one thing that I really loved she mentioned was the mention of freedom, that give freedom to your partner and have freedom and don't be insecure in that. A lot of people, I think, feel insecurity. They're afraid. There's self-doubt. There's comparison, jealousy, possessiveness happening. And we try to possess our partner. But when you start giving a certain freedom, freedom of expression, freedom of emotion to your partner, you also automatically give that freedom to yourself also. So when two people have complete freedom, there's a power that shows up. There's a strength that starts to cultivate. And I'm a big believer of giving freedom in any relationship, but in especially romantic relationships, I think freedom plays a huge role. And you could come across the most educated person out there, and still they'll have little doubt about giving freedom to their partner. The jealousy, the possessiveness, the ego, it's so strong. It won't let you give that freedom.
Yes, I think we all kind of forget that we're all individuals in the end of the day. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because you do realize as well the way that you communicate with your friends is different to your love interest or your partner. And it's almost as if sometimes you tend to assign more like pressure to that because you're like, well, this has got to work. Like we are together. Like this is the way you should be. And I question almost then
Yeah.
heading into this direction of thought as to why we think that way or why we treat each other that way when we are
Exactly.
in a partnership or
Right.
developing one.
I feel most people are just squeezing happiness or trying to squeeze happiness out of each other and calling it love. And most people are just attached and not in love, but they think it is love. Her talk made me meditate on what exactly love is in 2019. Has it become about casual sex? Has it become about relationships that change every week? Has it become about a certain equation that's filled with fear, possessiveness, and insecurity all the time? I mean, this is a social media age. And I saw one of her talks. I didn't listen to it. It was on the YouTube where she mentioned deleting the app is a new commitment in the relationship.
Which app?
I think she's talking about Tinder or
Oh, dating apps?
dating apps.
Oh, 100%. I just did
Right.
that. I was
Right.
like, step one, delete.
Right, yeah.
Let it happen. Let it
Exactly.
flow. Just be in the moment.
Yeah,
Don't search.
these are very interesting times, right? Relationships are defined in a very new lens, and I'm glad it's happening. We are not stuck in 1995 or the old ways of, defining the commitment, but we need to embrace the freedom within. I find that to be a very important instrument in a healthy relationship.
For sure. I mean, I love how you just also touched upon what was love looking like, or what is it like for you in 2019, because that's something that I don't think people often reflect upon, especially assigning a year to it. And she mentioned as well, if there's about having sex for, let's say, intimacy, or to befree yourself, or for naughtiness and things like that. And it's like, what are you going in for when you are in an intimate relationship, and doing sort of passionate acts?
I think, yeah, intentional sex is so important. It has to be intentional. I find making love to be a very funny word. We cannot make love. We have to allow love to make us. Like, love makes us. When you simply surrender, when you simply are into that space, love takes over, and we got to let that happen. So many people, when they are in that physical, intimate act, there's old narratives happening in their head. Am I looking good? Am I performing good? It should not be performance. It should be simply almost a meditative act. And that can only happen when you leave the mind behind. Then no mind zone, no old narrative. You could have had very abusive or painful or funny experiences in the past with your partners, but this is not that partner. This partner deserves complete undivided attention, and you deserve to be free from the old narratives. And I feel intentional sex is very important. So it should not be, I'm not a big fan of setting a date, a schedule to it, but allow it to happen.
Yes.
Don't complicate it. When it happens, it happens. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But you got to just release it, like
Yes.
relax
Don't
about
force it. Don't be sad about it. Nothing.
Yeah.
Just you don't even assign any value to it, really.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why we selected this, because, I mean, for me, from what I've witnessed, and this is something that you've just touched upon, is the old narratives within our minds, like, do I look good? But it's also something stemming from education, something that I've learned from the show of sex education, as well as being in London. I did a news report on sex and relationship educations
really?
within schools, that these are things we learn, the nuts and bolts, the biological factor of, like, how our bodies
Body
change
response, yeah.
over time and response and things, but we don't really learn as to the mental flow, the emotional flow. How do we
Yeah.
look after each other? How do we communicate? How do we connect?
Exactly.
That's life skills that we do not really learn at school. It's just things that
Yeah.
we have to learn as we live, as we
Life
explore.
teaches you, and sometimes we are open to it, and sometimes we are not open to learning.
Yes. Yes. So we want to get into we've done a Twitter poll, and
Oh,
the first question was, does good intimacy guarantee good sex? 58% said yes, versus 42% said no. What are your thoughts on that? Because she raised this statement, which I will say after we've discussed about what you think.
I feel if there is sex without intimacy, for some people it could be good sex. But that's not how I define sex. I define sex as sacred exchange of energy. So for someone like me who's looking at sex through the lens of that sacred exchange, the intimacy, or what I would call simply getting to be familiar with each other through silence, through laughter, through crying, through vulnerability, through a very gentle and mindful exchange of thoughts. And when anything that happens after that, it becomes good. It becomes fulfilling. It could be sex, could be conversation, could be a walk on the beach. Anything that happens after that vulnerable exchange, it works out to be good. And I see the poll results are interesting, because for some people, it doesn't matter if you are intimate, if you even know each other. For them, it's a performance, it's an act. A man could be, one of the partner could be coming from a different lens of just, a lot of people look at sex as a sneeze. They just need to release it.
Oh,
So, so
but that comes at the spur of the moment.
yeah, and it could be clearly that they don't need to be intimate. They don't need to exchange any vulnerability. For them, it's a release. They just needed to release this. And intimacy or no intimacy, both of them were hungry. And when you're hungry, you don't really look for organic kale or the best salad out there. You'll just, grab whatever is there. So I feel the other crowd, I don't know, 42%.
42% said no.
So, they must be really hungry, and they don't care about intimacy. They don't care about how much they know each other or what's the outcome of this exchange. For them, it could be just, a good performance. They needed to release it, and it happened in a good way for them.
I mean, I question, I guess, because there's so many different factors here with, does good intimacy guarantee good sex? First of all, what's good sex? That can
Exactly.
be by definition very different
Yeah.
for different people. And that could be assigning value of good sex being like, oh, that
How
the
long?
results happened or how
Yeah.
long and la la la. And I think for the people that said no, that it doesn't, because that's Esther, she says good intimacy doesn't guarantee good sex, and I think I wonder if that's like just the results of it. So even if there was good intimacy, that might have not been the results, and so that's why they're thinking, okay,
Exactly.
no.
Also, I feel, what's good intimacy? Let's say two people are coming from a very traumatic or bad relationship. For them, a good intimacy was just sitting in silence and watching sunset or listening to a song together. And that was a great intimacy for them. But they may not be ready to engage sexually. So the sex could not have been, all the great firecrackers or whatever, but they had a good intimacy. The key is, like how I see it, the key is to build that exchange, build that energy. I always say, touch her without touching her. You got to touch the soul.
You must follow Chandresh at CB Meditates. He has some of the most amazing poetry, and that's one of them that
It's one
I
of
know
them.
I've seen.
I'm a big advocate for that. Yeah.
Yes, well, I definitely, it's an interesting point about intimacy also, as well. It means different,
Right.
is different for different people, and essentially that comes down to the foundation of the relationship again, like how well do you know each other, how well are you listening to each other, in order to create that safe space and that space of intimacy, in order to then have the results of whatever you think is good sex or bad sex.
Right.
So I want to get into the topic talk, so the secret to desire in a long-term relationship, because I mean, it's interesting how relationships, long-term relationships and marriage have developed. From the beginning of time, it was more about an economic consensus.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that has been for centuries. And it's actually more like, it's not, let's say it's been a century or so that it's been more focusing on love. But that comes in hand, and this is something funny that Esther says, is that we expect of this marital status, which also goes in hand with economic institutions sometimes, but we expect from them as well to be a best friend, a partner, a passionate lover, give me belonging, transcendence, comfort,
Oh, yeah.
edge. There's an endless list, and along with that, let's just play with some toys and lingerie to save us from that, right?
Yeah,
And so
it was funny.
how do you feel about this shift in the committed relationship and all the complications and implications that today that seems to have?
I'm working with a couple right now, and I literally told the husband last week. He was expecting a lot from his partner, and I said, she is not your therapist. She's not your guru. She's not the muse that you want her to be. Right now, she's struggling to be just your wife. Allow her to be your partner. And when that role plays out, then you both could be friends. Then you both could be muse for each other. Then you both could relate to each other in a new way. But it's tragic that partners expect 50 different roles from one person. And that one person cannot fulfill that role. And that's why a lot of women, whoever is the dominating person in the relationship,
There's always one.
right, they when but the battle gets so ugly by the end of it, right? The person who loses the race or loses this whole contest, they feel abused, they feel almost, ignored, violated of their own rights. So they tend to have a very deep trauma about relationships, about intimacy, because they feel this is probably what my role is, to just keep playing different roles to my family, my husband, my kids. And it also brings me another point that I often mention, and which comes from the Tantra lineage. So Tantra says drop the word relationship, instead bring relating. So you relate to each other in a new way every day.
Yeah.
And honestly, Yasmin, this is pretty powerful stuff that I've tested in the last at least 8-9 years. And I tell people, before you start this with a partner, start with yourself. How do you relate with yourself today? When you wake up tomorrow morning, set this intention that today I'm going to relate with myself as a creative being. Tomorrow it could be a seeker. Third day it could be a friend. Fourth day it could be a daughter. I mean, every day there's a new light, new hope, new courage. And when you know how to relate to yourself, then you shift that to your partner, relate to your partner in a new way. And I think this complication of expecting so much, it starts to get resolved in a way when both the people are making a certain mindful effort of relating to each other, because it brings respect also to each other. Does it make sense?
Yes, I mean, completely. I just wonder then, because this is something that she had also mentioned, of when you try and relate, because it's a very selfless act.
Yes.
By relating with somebody, you're basically putting yourself into somebody's shoes. She mentions at one point, though, how if you are taking on that somebody, it's like you're nearly in that somebody's shoes, then how do you get out of it? How do you remove yourself out of it? By not being the one that gives them too much, because that other person isn't as selfless or conscious enough
Right.
to
And
relate. in
I,
that
I
form.
fully agree. I think that's why it has to start with you. If I have enough self-respect, if my self-worthiness is really strong, then I will know when I'm not being valued, when the partner is not putting the equal effort, and that's when I can remind them that you're not. This is partnership. You got to put the equal capital, and if you're not putting, this is not bringing worthiness to my existence. So, and I think anyone would respect. A self-esteemed person is always respected. In the relationship, you got to make that clear that I'm not I don't have a lack of self-esteem. I clearly know my worth. I think that changes a lot.
Yes, when you know yourself, when you know
Like,
your
know
worth,
yourself.
yes, like there's nobody else like you.
Yeah.
And so she mentions then, love is to have, but desire is to want. How do you feel about that? Because I'm a little bit hesitant about it. Just because I feel like if you have something, if you feel like you have something, it's almost as if you feel like you own it. And
I know
there's
what
a
you mean.
nice saying that I have heard from one of my great mentors who said, you cannot lose what you never had. And it's like, that's why that sentence struck me, because I don't want to feel like I own love.
Yeah.
Love should just be.
Absolutely. And I know we know each other, so I know this is what your, thinking is about love, and I'm on the same page. I feel when people like Esther Perel are speaking, they're speaking to a certain audience. When I'm talking, I know I'm talking to a spiritual audience who want to evolve. Her audience is something who wants to own a relationship, who wants to own their sexual power. So I sometimes get why she would say something like this, but I feel love is sharing and desire is being conscious. That's what I would say to it. I feel there's two desires, impulsive and conscious desires. Impulsive desires lead you on a quest of wanting everything, which is not the healthiest way to
Well,
have it.
she makes this difference as well between neediness and wanting.
I heard
Wanting
that.
being more healthy than needing, because needing
Yeah.
is like, who wants anybody you've never really been attracted to somebody who needs you. It's like, I need you, baby. I need you to be here right now. Like,
No one likes that.
Nobody likes that, right? But it's like, wanting has a different effect. Like, if I say I need you versus I want you, that has a very different feeling
Right.
and effect.
Yeah, I feel, personally speaking, I feel if someone says I need you, or in that neediness way, that's a turn off. If someone says I want you, that also feels someone wants to tame me. So that's also a turn off.
Ah, tame you.
Yeah, so that's also no, no. But if someone says, I want to share this energy with you, I want to have this conscious exchange with you. But again, this is coming from a spiritual teacher, so I'm going to
Yes.
have a very different
Perspective on
perspective on
that.
this. And
Yes.
I feel her audience is not the meditative audience, it's a different kind of audience who's struggling with relationships. I mean, they should be meditative. That would be really, really powerful, I think.
Yes, I mean, because you've been mentioning a little bit about Tantra, and
Yeah,
that kind of goes, I feel like couples might kind of turn into that direction of wanting to explore if they want to spice things up. But
right.
ultimately, Tantra does go in hand with meditation. It's not what people think it is. So that's, something that you're trying to demystify what that Tantra
I've
is.
been trying that. Yeah.
So we're actually going to get into that pretty soon with our special segment. We've called it the Tantra.
And I feel if there's an autobiography I would write,
Woo!
is that Half Break?
No.
I was like,
Is it half break for Tantra now?
Tantra,
Tantra.
unintended.
right.
Oh, hey, that's Steph, our queen. She
I know,
knows
right?
what's up.
She absolutely knows.
She's feeling it.
Right.
But it's, I mean, sorry.
So I was saying, if there's an autobiography I would write on myself, I would call it I Tried. That's all. I tried to demystify Tantra. I tried to channel sex into spirituality. I can only try. Let's see what happens out of it.
Well, from what I see on your following and the responses, people
It's,
seem
yeah,
to
it's cooking
really
up, I think.
appreciate
Yeah.
it. Yeah, it's boiling up. It's
boiling
warming up.
It's warming up. Yeah.
She mentions about, I like this quote, and it was a little bit difficult for me to decipher. Mystery is not about looking for new places, but looking through new eyes.
I'm a big advocate of this in a slightly, different way. So I'll tell this to all the people I work with, that when you are with a new partner, when you talk to them, when you touch them, when you hug them, when you kiss them, you got to have a new energy in it. Do not bring the old narratives of the old relationship into it. And this is a problem that's very consistent in many couples. Especially, I think, if you have been into pretty messed up relationships in the past, and when you are engaging with someone new, the old story shows up. So I feel the spice, the passion, the love is in a new touch, and that new touch comes from a new story, a new energy.
Like I want to say,
Right.
let me get
Not
a
the
new
new
hand from the doctor. Hey,
Yeah,
hand me a new hand so I can feel that new touch.
I phrased it once to someone that you got to touch her with a new hand. He's like, "What's wrong with these hands?" I said, "Okay, so let me rephrase it. It's new energy in the old hands.
New thoughts.
New thoughts, new respect for that person. I think the reverence is so important. I'm a big advocate of this word, reverence, like respect for your partner everywhere, not just in the bedroom, but everywhere you are with her or him. Show reverence for their existence."
She mentions of there being a crisis in desire, which ultimately means a crisis in imagination. And I think that's something that you can talk about big because,
Yeah.
Tapping into your awareness and your higher consciousness, what is that blockage that some people may experience as to why there is such a crisis in desire and ultimately imagination as well? And what does that even mean?
I paused the video when I was driving and listening to this video, and when she said crisis in desire is a crisis in imagination, I paused and I repeated this to myself, that crisis in desire is a crisis in meditation also. If you're not meditative, that would mean you are either in the past or in the future, because you are living and loving through the mind, and mind doesn't exist in the present moment. And when you're not in the present moment with someone, the past takes over. The fear, projections, the doubts of the future takes over. And then, of course, imagination gets hurt. But it's all a collective consciousness that you got to build with your partner. It involves imagination, awareness, affection, intention, meditation. It's a combination of so many things. If there's no right awareness, the imagination will not go anywhere. You can imagine, but if there's no right awareness, if there's no meditative energy in it, which basically means being here in this exact moment and not being somewhere else, not like I was speaking to someone last night who's got this great partner, but she keeps bringing a very interesting narrative which doesn't exist. She's bringing future fears. What if he does this? What if he again speaks to, his ex-girlfriend? What if he again? And I asked her, has he spoken to her or has he done anything? She said, no, it's just my mind.
Preempting.
Exactly.
Yes.
And it happens to so many of us, right? In a different, twisting ways, our mind creates stories. So I feel crisis and desire is a crisis in meditation. And I encourage every couple, you got to meditate
I
together.
think that's beautiful. I mean, it's true. Meditation can be so hard for many people, though, like Keven, but it does amplify that creativity and, of course, in that sense, your imagination as well. I mean, there are many forms of meditation, I suppose, and, whether that is you focusing on your breath, being very, very present, or whether that is you trying to manifest something. And I teach yoga as well, so I teach my students to then
Nice.
always assign a color to a word, an intention that they have for the day or for their practice.
That's beautiful.
And that is then to amplify that the creative mind,
Right.
and I think that's essentially the same thing with desire, the acts that you give to your partner and things like that. It's,
Right.
how are you going to develop it by really creating it in a sense within your mind and your being and yourself and feeling it.
I would encourage those who are listening to have this collective intention with your partner. That collective intention could be cultivating conscious desires together every day in every way possible.
That's a really great point, because then it's
Yeah.
like opening up that dialogue between the couple
Exactly.
of then seeing, where are you at? Like, what is your intention? How are you feeling? And then opening up, and I think that's what's really important within a relationship. That's one of the most important things. Communication is key, and transparency without feeling judged and guilt.
It's huge. One of the biggest lessons in relationships I learned from a professor in my, school in New York, in business school. He was a very interesting guy. He never ever told us to open the books. He would walk in. It was a Saturday morning class from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. And he would just share his experiences. And I forgot everything I learned in college except this one lesson. He said, the key to any relationship is communication. And you just said it, Because if there's no communication, then no business, no personal relationship, no marriage, no spiritual companionship, nothing can survive. You got to have open communication.
And so we're going to segue into our Tantra.
Nice.
You've mentioned, so these are top 3 tantric toolkits
Yes.
that people should practice.
So, number 1 would be indulge with awareness. Whatever you do it with awareness. Okay?
So whether that be eating,
Eating, taking shower, walking, drinking, drinking anything. I was thinking of caramel latte right now, but yeah, drinking anything.
boba.
Boba tea. You're reading my
I know
mind.
you like boba tea. It's your favorite.
You're reading my mind. So yeah, indulge with awareness. Number 2, relate with your partner in a new way every day. Uh, Drop the word relationship for a few days, for an hour, and just talk to your partner. How do I relate to you in this moment? Bring relating and drop the relationship. Okay, number 3, I would say bring freedom and meditation together. Yeah, cultivate the freedom and cultivate the meditation.
Which I think is so important to know, in a sense that, especially Esther also mentions about when people suffer through traumas and anxiety or stress and
Yeah.
worry and all those things, like one of the narratives that you mentioned of the girls, and it's like ultimately cultivating that blockage. And so it's important for people and partners like you to understand yourself as well as your partner to understand, and kind of go through those methods to relate to each other, to indulge with awareness, to drop the label and be free, and not having those other past, future narratives.
It's a big one, I think. Also have self-esteem for yourself, like have a self-worthiness. Definitely meditate on it every day. And at the same time have trust. Trust the process of your life. That's not going to unfold the way it unfolded in the past. A new trust has to happen.
Developing that,
Yeah.
yes, that's beautiful. So we like to always do another little section called Teddy's Talk, which is our fans who then
nice.
go through some of our polls. And the first one was, I'm most drawn to my partner when. So they had to finish the sentence. Most people said when they make me laugh. Actually, that was the only answer, was when they make me laugh. And there was a few people that had said the exact same words. And that just proves, how humor is
so
important.
important. My
Don't
God.
take life, relationships, everything
Yeah.
too seriously. Have fun. Obviously, don't step on number 2, but have just enjoy yourself. So
Don't take yourself so seriously.
yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, Esther, she mentioned all these different things that she had found, which was,
Right.
I'm most drawn to my partner when she's away, apart, reunited, or imagining to be back with my partner. So it's rooted in absence and longing. And then in another sense of when she's in the studio or in her most passionate self, right? Doing the things that she loves and basically being very radiant and confident and somewhat keeping a little bit of mystery, elusiveness, and also but also is very like you can see her like she's comforting or recognizable, and I'm not saying
Right.
she, but it also speaks to he.
Right.
Or most drawn to the partner when they're surprised, laugh together. So that's obviously a very important factor. And whatever like things you can pull out of each other. The other question was, for those who are in long-term relationships, how do you keep things spicy? The answer,
Yeah, I would love to know what people said.
humor is so important.
It is
Haha.
right. I think it's so underrated. Like people are focusing on so many other things, but humor, it's so underrated. It's so important.
Yeah, and so I think, ultimately, because we're coming to the end where we're going to give our audiences some tangible tools, some tools that they can take away in order to practice with their partner, something that's easy and digestible. And, we've already talked about meditation. And I think that in itself as well, it's like if you are going to be doing it, whether it's on your own or with a partner, have fun with it. Find the humor within the
Absolutely.
given circumstances as well. What would be for you an advice to anybody listening as to how they can still create that desire within a long-term relationship?
I feel set intention in your relationships. Maybe once a week when you meditate together, or every day when you meditate together, revisit your intentions together. What's our conscious intention with this relationship? Have respect for each other. I often say this, that your partner is not your coloring book. Don't color her with your favorite colors. Let her bloom on her own. She's not here to fulfill your ego or your expectations. So release her or him from your expectations.
That's beautiful. I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
Right.
somebody actually mentioned this to me as well. Fulfill your life with colors. Just paint it with a bunch of colors, and that's how you can just live. I would say to ultimately, I think as well, from the get-go, find out what your love language is. Starting off
It's
with
important.
yourself, what is your love language?
Yeah.
And then find out what your partner's love language is. Not ultimately saying that once you know what your partner's love language is, that you have to feel the pressure of this is what you got to do, but it's really like listening, being in tune with it, constantly the consistency of communication to also showcase the respect that you have for that person, again with relating to them as well, and giving them the comfort of knowing that they won't be judged for whatever they do or say. I know that can be hard when we are amidst of like getting mad at each other or be feeling insecure for some reason. But I think, it's just very important to feel comfortable and know that we're both individuals. Everybody is an individual and has their own interests and needs. But, you work together, you come together by really listening and communicating with the utmost consistency and transparency.
Right. I mean, we are humans. We are going to be angry. We are going to be frustrated. We are going to go through our insecurities and all the fluctuations. And that's okay. but we can always remind ourselves to, be in the present moment again, have the same respect again, have the open air again, a new communication again, revisiting the collective intentions. So I think the reminders are important.
And I think that's just a common thing that you have to do. Like, you have to keep on
Absolutely.
reminding yourself on whatever you do, right?
Yeah, and then it becomes a habit. After you consistently do this, it becomes a part of the culture in your heart that this is what I have to do. This is just who we are now. So after a few weeks or few months, it just becomes part of your being. And even if the relationship ends after a while, it ends in a very mindful way. It continues in a very interesting way. It's not ugly. It doesn't have any grudge
That's
anymore.
why daily life is like a daily practice. You got a new beginning every
Absolutely.
day. You rise to
Absolutely.
practice and hone and earn everything that you want. So with that, we're finishing off. But it was such a pleasure having you. Where can
pleasure.
everybody find you on social media?
Everybody can find me on Instagram at CB Meditates and listen to my podcast. It's called Break the Norms. It's on Apple, Spotify, and all the places where podcasts are streamed now. But yeah,
Amazing. Yes. Okay, brilliant. And you can find me at Yasmine Tanres. And we'll be back next week. Jesse will be back as well. Yay. And we'll be breaking down another TED Talk. So stay tuned for next week. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye.
Thank you.
Our founder, Keven Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.